welcome. My name is Kari Hagenow. I'm the coordinator of the Door County Invasive Species Team. Tonight I'm going to be talking about Phragmites, give you an idea of what we've done in the county in terms of Phragmites control, and then kind of where we're going next. So we've done some pretty significant control of the plant within the county, and we're looking at continuing that by educating landowners so that they know what it looks like when it comes back or know how to control it on their own property. So if you're not familiar with Phragmites, this is a grass. It's also called common reed grass. Most people recognize it because it's about 10 feet tall and it can block your entire shoreline view. As you can see there, those stems are much taller than 10 feet. That guy is about 6 and those are about 12 in the picture. So can exceed 10 feet in height, gets this showy plume about midsummer into the fall. And then in the winter it will die back, but those stems will stay standing. They'll be brown dead stems. In the summer it has this bluish green color to it, and you can see the dead stems from last year's growth within that. It spreads two ways. As well, first of all, as you can see from those pictures, it can essentially crowd out other native vegetation. It can alter the hydrology of an area because it uses a lot more water than our native vegetation when you get dense stands of it. And it spreads in two ways. And one of these ways is via seed, which they used to say that it couldn't really spread by seed. It wasn't very viable. The new research is showing that it actually could be more viable than we thought. So seed spread is a way that it's spreading. But more commonly what we see are these long stolons or runners. And what that is it's like a shoot of the plant that it sends out along the ground, out from the main infestation. And those can be anywhere from 40 to 60 feet in length, sometimes shorter than that, sometimes 60 feet is about as long as we've seen them, but they're pretty impressive. And what happens is it roots in the ground about every 10 centimeters, and then every 10 centimeters above ground, it sends up a new shoot that becomes its own plant that then becomes a new source of spread in the future. So it commonly spreads through those, and they can also be underground as well, where these rhizomes or stolons are reaching out underground. What you see above ground in this plant, there is usually equally as much biomass below the ground that you cannot see. So I'll talk more about control in a little bit, but when you're trying to control this plant, it's really important that you're not just getting what you can see, you're also getting what's under the ground. So our work on Phragmites really started in 2009, and it was a 3-year project funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And I say us, but really it was led by the Wisconsin DNR with the support of the Door County Invasive Species Team Partnership. So really working to identify where it was within these conservation opportunity areas, they're called. Those are the ones you can see highlighted here.
Can you just show us where Sturgeon Bay is?
Oh yeah, Sturgeon Bay is right about here.
Okay.
So this would be South Lake Michigan Drive within that conservation opportunity area up through Lake Forest Park and Glidden Drive area.
Lake South, I think you got it.
Well, yeah, South Lake Michigan.
Lake Forest Park would be south and north. Lake
Right here, yep.
Yeah.
And then Glidden Drive up
Got
here
it,
north.
yep.
Yep, yeah. So those
areas that you've treated?
So those are areas that yes, were treated, first of all, as part of this project with the Wisconsin DNR. So the conservation opportunity areas are identified by the state's Wildlife Action Plan. So the DNR applied for this funding to treat within those areas. They received it, and they did 3 years of treatment within these, again, highlighted areas that you see, beginning in 2011. So the partnership supported that in that we helped to find volunteers to do things like inventory, and then the DNR hired a contractor to treat it. So this was the Phragmites that we inventoried in 2011. We had folks out on the shoreline. I think I have a picture of that here. No, I don't. We had some folks out on the shoreline, volunteers. There's a picture for you. One of our brave volunteers in the winter identifying where this plant was growing on the shorelines of the county. And originally, it started just within those conservation opportunity areas that we were mapping, and then we realized that, as you could see previously here, it's pretty widespread throughout the county. So we had reason to inventory more than just those conservation opportunity areas to get a real idea of where this plant was within the county. So in 2012, we started the inventory outside the conservation opportunity areas, and we also received some funding to do a little bit of control in southern Door County. And we went to the townships as well and asked if they had any money to donate to the effort. And the town of Naswaupee, since it was a very little snowfall winter, pretty calm winter by our terms, they had a lot left in their budget from snow removal. So they gave a significant donation and said, we want to see Phragmites controlled. And with that and some funding that we had, in 2012 and 2013, we were able to treat Phragmites on all of the shorelines and right-of-way within southern Door County. So it may be really hard to see here, but all the little green dots are areas where we found it and then it was treated. So this is what that inventory looked like. If you zoom in, close, you can see these are individual areas of infestation that we identified, and we used that volunteer inventory so that we were able to get an accurate cost from a contractor to treat it. So 2012 and 2013, like I said, we did more than 32 acres of shoreline and 16 acres of right-of-way control within southern Door County, and then we also did the town of Sevastopol. The funding, again, funding and support, the Forest Service, the donations from local townships. When we sent a permission slip to treat somebody's property, we had them give us permission. We also asked for a voluntary donation, and we were very successful in securing some money from private donations. And then also, some of our local landowner associations gave donations for the effort too. And then we were able to do some outreach and education of folks through a Wisconsin DNR grant that funds me being out on the shoreline talking to people like you'll hear. So this was what we actually controlled in 2012 there, and the blue dots. 2013, we retreated that area, and we moved and treated some additional areas in the county. Again, we were really successful in getting some private donations and more funding. So we moved north and treated some for the first year in the northern Door. And then as we went on throughout time, so we started here and did 2 years. We worked our way north, and as of right now, every shoreline within the county on which we got permission has gotten 2 years of treatment for Phragmites if it was present. So that's where we were at the end of last year, and we were out of money to continue doing the control, and we applied for a number of grants to hopefully give folks a third year of treatment. But we were not successful in obtaining funding for that third year of treatment. We do have an education grant that again funds my position as the coordinator and allows us to do education and outreach. So where we stand now is we've given people 2 years of control. In some cases that means the Phragmites is gone, in other cases it is not. So what we're really trying to do is make people aware of what it looks like when it starts to come back. It's not going to be 6 feet tall with a big flower head. In some cases it's only a foot during that first year after treatment. So we're trying to educate people of what to watch for, and at the same time we're trying to reach out to groups of homeowners in priority areas to help us continue to inventory and to even do some treatments themselves or to organize and find a way to do the treatments. And one example of this is the Jacksonport, Shores of Jacksonport Neighborhood Association. They came to us last year, and the town had recently passed an ordinance, a Phragmites ordinance, and they heard about that. So they came to the Door County Invasive Species Team and the Door County Soil and Water Conservation Department, and they said, we know there's an ordinance, we know you've done treatment, what can we do to continue this? And what we were able to do is their Shores of Jacksonport Neighborhood Association agreed to pay for a contractor to do the actual treatment. I went out and met with a group of volunteers from that association, and I provided them with information about identifying Phragmites and the tools and things that they needed to go out and inventory and find it and take GPS points. They went out and did all of that work for me. They came back and gave me that data. I made maps for a contractor. They secured permissions from all of the landowners that had Phragmites on the shoreline, and they were able to do a really successful treatment that covered Jacksonport once more at very little cost to the association. And this year they are again doing that. I'll be out tomorrow training those volunteers. And actually the town of Jacksonport now has agreed to pay for that treatment. So the cost of that treatment is less and less each year because we're finding less and less Phragmites. So just one example of how we can work together and work with different landowner associations and townships to continue this. I'm just going to say a little bit about some of the techniques that we're telling people to use to control Phragmites if they decide to not hire a contractor and are interested in doing it themselves. It's really as simple as if we all are caretakers of our own property, it makes this a lot easier. So we're really hoping people will be out on their own shoreline and be able to recognize this because they're looking and they're aware of what's there. You know, anytime you're managing an invasive plant, there's no cookie cutter template to use. It really depends on what your shoreline looks like, what your property looks like. If it's wet at the time of treatment, how big of an area is it? In some cases, folks just have too much Phragmites to handle as one person doing it on their own. And in that way, they look to get their neighbors involved or hire a contractor. Really, the take-home message is the easiest way to control Phragmites is as soon as you see it come back or as soon as you see the first stem take root. Because then you have a chance to just dig up that single stem and be done with it. So this is an example of, you know, here's maybe what we started with, and we did 2 years of treatment on it, and we've knocked it back, and it might come back looking like the top picture there. So it's not going to be these, again, 10-foot tall stems with flowering heads. It may only be 1 or 2 feet tall, and it may not have flower heads at all. So we're trying to make people aware that this is Phragmites as much as this is Phragmites, and this eventually can become that. So, you know, just knowing that it can come back and look a little different. And then habitat type plays a big role in if you're going to manage it yourself, because if it is in an aquatic environment, so if the ground is wet at time of treatment, if you're standing in your socks and your socks get wet, that's an aquatic environment. And in that case, you have to be, first of all, certified in aquatic pesticide application in order to do that control, and you would also need a permit if the proposed area is wet at the time of treatment. So, you know, in a lot of cases, if folks don't have that certification, they look to hire a contractor who does. Or what we've advised groups of homeowners to do is if there's one person who's interested in being certified who could control multiple properties, that certification is about $50 to be certified, and then they would be certified for 5 years. Unfortunately, with this plant, as I said, what you see above ground is equal to what's below ground, so using herbicides is the most effective control method, and it's the primary one used by land managers and the DNR right now. So there's, typically they use broad spectrum herbicides, glyphosate, which is like your Roundup or Rodeo, that's the active ingredient in it, or imazapyr, which requires that certification to purchase and use. There are aquatic and terrestrial formulas of all of these. So again, if you're in water, you need to make sure you're using an aquatic formulation, which would be Rodeo versus Roundup. This time actually I've got pictures to show each of these herbicide application techniques. There's hand swiping, a bundle and cut method, or a foliar spray. And what this really shows is you have to look at your individual site conditions and what your Phragmites stand looks like. So is it a huge dense patch or just a few stems? And that'll kind of guide you towards what technique would work the best. So if you have, say, a few stems and it's not terribly dense, but there's really good native vegetation intermixed, you may want to consider a bundle and cut treatment. So in this case, those stems are bundled together. It's dense enough that you can do that. You cut them at the tops with a loppers, and then you just dab the herbicide right on those cut ends. So it's a really direct application method. You're not worried about overspray or drift of herbicide, and you're not impacting the native vegetation around it, since these are broad spectrum herbicides. There's the hand swiping method as well. So this we would use in a situation where you find only a few stems. There's good native vegetation intermixed. It's not enough stems to bundle together and actually have a bundle. So what we do in this scenario is, like the lady in the picture up here, she's got a chemical glove on. She's got a cotton glove over the top of it. She's got a little bottle with herbicide. So she's just wetting that cotton glove with the herbicide, and then she's taking that individual stem and hand swiping it and getting the herbicide on anywhere from 75 to 80% of the leaf area is effective. So that works really well when you only have a few stems. And again, it's a direct application method, so you don't have to worry about drift or overspray of the herbicide. And then when you have a stand like we see in the lower corner there, where it's overwhelming and very dense, what we'll typically do is do a foliar spray, and that's what a lot of our contractors do. So that in some cases uses just a hand sprayer like this, or a small pump sprayer, or the backpack sprayer like you see in the picture. And that's a spray of the herbicide onto the plant itself. Of course, there are, you have to take more caution with that broadcast or backpack spray. You don't want to have the overspray or drift. You need the proper conditions, so you don't want it to be windy that day. Whenever you're using these herbicides, you don't want to be using them if it's going to rain shortly after. If you have overspray or drift, that's where you're looking at impacts to native plants. It's costing you more to do it because you're using more herbicide. And anytime you're using herbicides, following the label directions is the most important, because the label is the law. These herbicides are approved by the EPA, and what it says on the label is what's approved. So you always have to follow that label. We also add things called surfactants to help the plant take in the herbicide. So those are things that help it move the herbicide through the plant, and then we use dyes so we can see that we're hitting the target leaf area, that we're not overspraying. Treatment timing, again, I'll repeat, most of the biomass, you can't see, it's under the ground. So the best time to treat this plant with herbicides is late summer, early fall. Typically our window we shoot for is the month of September. You can start a little later in August, and you can go through October, but it depends on if your plants are starting to die back and senesce by then. We shoot for that September window because what's happening is the plant is pulling sugars and energy down into the rhizomes. It's also going to translocate that herbicide with it down into the plant rhizomes. So what's going to happen is you're not just top killing the plant, you're actually having the herbicide go in and kill the roots, which are what will go dormant in the winter and then resprout the next year. Mechanical treatments, people ask a lot about cutting or mowing. You can use mechanical treatments to remove dead stems after you've done a treatment and you want easier access into there the following year. You can use it to promote new plant growth, so you're going to spray it, you cut it before you spray, you get all of its energy into putting up some new shoots, and then you spray those small shoots. And again, it aids in identification once you get that biomass out of there. Of course, you want appropriate timing, so you don't want to be spreading it more than you're controlling it, and appropriate disposal. This is a plant that will spread by plant parts or spread by rhizomes. So if you're chopping those things up and dragging them behind a mower, you could actually be making the problem worse. What I will say about mechanical treatment alone, cutting individual plants in late summer or fall when it needs that energy will set it back. It won't kill the plant. The plant will most likely return the next year. You have to follow up with that, or if you're going to mow, if you're going to try to use that as a control method, you have to continually mow. So it's not really a once a year thing if you want to get rid of it. And really important is cleaning equipment after. So like I said, it'll chop that up and spread by plant part. So you want to make sure you're cleaning that mower and checking for those plant parts before you're going to another part of your property and then spreading there potentially. So those are just some ways that you can control it. And you know, kind of where we're going with our project, we've been doing outreach with individual landowners in the towns of Naswapee, Sturgeon Bay, Sevastopol, and the city of Sturgeon Bay thus far this year, and we'll be reaching out to some more as the summer continues. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are you going to let, if you walked people's property or on the beach, are you letting people know that you have it?
Yeah, well, what we're going to do with, if we can, is provide the inventory to the homeowner associations first of all. I think we probably will be notifying individual landowners, but it may be on a case-by-case basis too. If there are only a few stems, that's hard to say. If there are ones that have significant populations, we will be definitely reaching out to those landowners individually.
Down County TT, by chance, there's
Yeah.
a swale about a half mile from the lake. Is at this. It's like got the tall, huge tall, I mean, it's on the right side, on the west side. It's huge.
If it's what I'm thinking of, I think it is.
I mean, it's only swale, and I think it's got this.
Yeah.
It does.
So I will say we've been walking the shorelines and we've been sending letters specifically to shoreline landowners, but we are also inventorying and keeping track of these populations, both within the right-of-way and where we can see them on private property. And unfortunately, we don't have funding to do anything about that ourselves right now. Again, we'll be reaching out to some landowners where there's an opportunity to, but we're constantly pursuing funding to do more.
I don't know who owns that property, but that's the worst I've seen.
And we've seen populations too that, you know, again, we treated the shore, but there's stuff that's very near to the shore that wasn't treated. So we're trying to get a hold of where all of those locations are, but.
Are you concerned about the herbicides and things like Parkinson's disease and things like that? There are, you know, I mean, my wife's got a fellowship in integrative medicine, and she gets mad at me that we have a service putting stuff on our lawn because the studies show that that can affect, you know, or cause.
And there's,
I'm just curious because
Roundup
is a pretty strong product.
And I don't deny there are risks associated with the use of any herbicide. I mean, you are using a chemical. Part of why I talk about these really direct methods is not only because of the native vegetation, but because you're using much less herbicide on the land, and you're reducing the risk of that, you know, being in your soil. Some of these herbicides are meant to persist for longer than others. So this imazapyr, the reason it works better is because it persists longer than Roundup in the environment. We really try to, you know, promote responsible use. Of course, the label and saying the label is the law is one way of doing that, because the label is very clear on where you can spray it, where you can't. These are things that they've looked at as the EPA and in testing and approving this herbicide. So, you know, we understand that there are risks involved, and sometimes those connections are unclear. So there's been recent talk about Roundup as a carcinogen, and you know, we try to do the best we can in making it.
When you look at it, you're using, a lot of these are close to the water. Now you got Roundup being introduced into the water. I just, you know, I have a well.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I have no idea how far down it is, but I'm just, you know, I'm just kind of curious. Do I want to be putting much? I don't even know if I have it. I haven't seen anything that looks like that on my property.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, you don't want to have.
And I don't think, again, with, you know, a direct application method, there should be no concern about your well.
The spraying is more what I was.
That broadcast spraying? And we, you know, the contractors will do that, but again, they really try to do it under those right conditions at the right time, reduce the overspray, drift, anything like that. But
The specific chemical that's used for Phragmites, that imazapyr active ingredient, is also only available to certified contractors.
Yeah.
So they kind of, the EPA kind of delineates these different categories of chemicals to prevent the novice user from abusing it or overspraying or anything like that.
Well, I've just, I mean, I already spent $350 on 2 ash trees.
Mm-hmm.
2 ash trees out of 20.
Yeah.
Thank God the rest are all near the power lines, so the Sturgeon Bay utilities will end up, if they die, they're gonna probably have to take them down, but it's not inexpensive to have a contractor put something on. I just, and the Emerald Ash Borer product that, that they use, this is probably a little more expensive than what they're using for
Yeah,
Phragmites.
the difference between a chemical such as imazapyr habitat and the translocated injection that you're doing in the tree,
Right.
the work is a lot more invasive. You have a continual thing, so it's not really, it's almost apples and oranges
Yeah,
when
I'm
you're
just
comparing
wondering.
these.
I don't know
Yeah.
that much about it, it's just,
Yeah.
that's the
And-
little bit that I have
Sure.
been involved.
yeah, yeah. And with the herbicide use, we certainly understand that there are landowners that aren't comfortable using it on their property. And, Phragmites, you can try to dig it. And I know people who have been successful.
Does anyone say, hey, I like the way it looks?
Yes.
We have had
Because
folks.
it's sort of I mean, you come down County TT,
Yeah.
it's sort of different.
Yeah,
You know.
I mean, we can't force anybody to remove
I'm
it
just
as the Door
curious,
County
like,
Invasive Species Team,
How
but
can I find out if you guys walked in front of my property and found something, which probably you didn't, but,
Well, the
the
inventory
web map.
that we're going to be putting into our mapping database will first of all be shared with the town of Sturgeon Bay, and then we will also be placing it within the Door County web map. It's that.
is that the, I mean, there's a map that shows every parcel in Door County.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
so
the
this
web
is
map.
this map,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of interesting to see who.
Yeah. When you have the left-hand bar that shows your layers or things you can turn on and off, if you go under conservation and then invasive plants,
Oh.
you can click on the Phragmites will come up. You can click on that and you can see all the places we've found it in the county at any time. So not just this year. If you historically had it on your property and it was treated, you would be able to turn on layers on and off to see that. So.
Does it tend to be in areas that are less shaded, meaning more, I mean, places I've seen that aren't
For the most
underneath, cedar trees and tall
Yeah.
trees that are, where the grass hardly grows.
Right.
part. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where we're really seeing it, or where we've focused on in the past for good reason is the shorelines. And what happened is when the water levels here were so low, there was all of that exposed lake bed. And that is just prime habitat for this plant to kind of take off in when there's no competing vegetation and it's, this moist exposed lake bed. So we saw it just go nuts when the water levels went low. And we realized it about the time it was happening, and by then, you're starting treatments, but you're already behind the ball on it. So the water level coming up has actually helped us with this because it tends to stay down below that ordinary high water mark. And if it does move upland more into shaded areas, it doesn't grow quite as dense and monoculture as you see in some of the pictures. So it's really wetlands, open wetlands, and our shorelines. So not to say that we haven't seen it in upland and places like that, but there are always exceptions.
And the reason it's pretty prolific in right-of-ways is because those areas do remain wet because that's the drainage for the roads, but then you also have mowers going over it.
Yeah.
And the right-of-ways generally don't get treated with any chemical.
I
So
even
you're
wonder
just,
if this, what I'm talking about, I don't even know if the mowers go along, I mean, it's right up, almost up against the road.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's almost, if it wasn't the fact you gotta slow down quite a bit for the swale,
yeah.
it'd be dangerous.
Yeah, that is, yeah, I remember that place from yesterday, and that is
In
Phragmites.
fact, if you go the speed limit through there, you're almost pushing it a little bit. I mean,
Mhm.
it's,
Yeah, and that can also be dispersed through mowers as well, because if
Yeah.
it starts off on the top of that, right on that shoulder of the road, and you have a mower going over it, you can kind of see where the fragments get sprayed
Mhm.
by the blades. So it just kind of creates this new infestation. It's a constant challenge.
yeah, there's a lot of other ones in here
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
The good thing is, you know, we're out there now after 2 years of treatment, and in some cases, 2 years of treatment that happened 2 years ago, and we're still seeing significantly less of it. In some places, we're not seeing it coming back,
great.
which is good. And of course, coming into Door County from areas to the south, you can almost see that line where we have been working, you know, up to the county line on it. And hopefully, you know, we're going to continue to work with groups in Kewaunee and Brown County, and, you know, hopefully continue to make an impact in Door County, but also get, so it's not always going to be a problem for us, because as long as it's right up onto that county line, we know it's a battle. So
And additionally, the county, the Soil and Water Conservation Department, is working with local municipalities as well. So we provide them with the inventory of right-of-ways and shorelines, and they can possibly add to their budget doing some treatments of Phragmites. Nasswaupee and Jacksonport are currently the only 2 towns that have an ordinance in place for Phragmites, but there is interest for the city of Sturgeon Bay, the town of Sevastopol, and we will be talking to the town of Sturgeon Bay on July 5th. And what an ordinance will kind of do, will help those landowners who are already doing the treatments or have already managed the Phragmites on their own property. But you've got like that vacant landowner, nobody knows how to get in touch with this person, or it's a lot that's up for sale and it's realtor owned. And it's kind of like a hotbed for Phragmites, and it just keeps spreading on everybody's property. The ordinance will actually help us treat that Phragmites so that all of the neighbors are not getting negatively impacted by that one stand. So it's not something that we're putting in place to punish anybody, and the inventories that we're doing is not to single people out. It's to provide us the opportunity to get those vacant lots or the hidden landowners that just don't come. So we're getting a lot of support from private landowners and the local towns.
I think they should have to forfeit their property. I think that's what you should do. Sell it and use the money for this.
Yeah, if you're not gonna take care of it.
That's right.